Have you ever wondered how a single act of kindness can transform a life? This is a remarkable story of Teo, a young coconut seller whose genuine generosity altered not just his future, but his entire community's destiny. By the end of this journey, you'll discover how authentic human connection can bridge worlds apart and create opportunities where none seemed possible. Join me as we explore how one coconut changed everything. The morning sun blazed mercilessly over Makoko Beach, where 12-year-old Teo arranged his small collection of coconuts under the sparse shade of a weather-beaten umbrella. Unlike the other vendors who called out aggressively to passing tourists, Teo sat quietly, watching the waves crash against the shore while contemplating the day ahead. His family needed every cent he could earn. Since his father's fishing boat had been damaged in last season's storm, they'd struggled to keep food on the table. His mother's seamstress work barely covered school fees for him and his two younger sisters. Each coconut sold meant another meal, another day of education, another small step toward stability. The coastal village had changed dramatically in recent years. Foreign hotel chains had purchased much of the beachfront, restricting local access and pushing fishermen like Teo's farther further out to sea. The tourism brought money, but little of it flowed into the hands of community members who had called this place home for generations. Tourists strolled past Teo's humble stand without a glance, drawn instead to the colorful drink shacks with their fancy signs and exotic names. By midday, he had sold only 2 coconuts. His shoulders slumped as he watched a group of wealthy visitors emerge from the newest resort, their sunglasses worth more than his family earned in months. One man broke away from the group, unlike the others in their bright vacation clothes. He wore simple khaki shorts and a plain white shirt rolled at the sleeves. His weathered face suggested someone who had spent considerable time outdoors, though his confident stride revealed a man accustomed to authority. The stranger paused near Teo's stand, wiping sweat from his brow as he gazed out at the ocean. There was something different about him. He wasn't taking photos or talking loudly. He simply observed, his eyes taking the fishing boats in the distance, the eroding shoreline, the children playing in the shallow water. "Excuse me, sir," Teo said softly. "Would you like a coconut?" The man turned, seeming almost surprised to find someone addressing him. His eyes crinkled at the corners as he regarded Teo's modest display. "How much?" he asked, his accent revealing American origins. 300 naira, Teo replied, the standard price he charged tourists, nearly twice what locals paid, but still reasonable by foreign standards. The man reached for his wallet, but paused when his phone rang. He answered, his expression darkening as he listened. Teo couldn't understand much of the conversation, but recognized the tense tone of business problems. The man ended the call with a frustrated sigh. "Rough day?" Teo ventured, selecting the ripest coconut from his collection. The stranger laughed without humor. "You could say that. Oil drilling complications. Not something you need to worry about." Teo thought about his community's struggles, how the nearby offshore drilling had affected fishing patterns and occasionally left black residue on their once pristine shores. He thought about his father's stories of abundant catches before the big companies arrived. "Actually, sir, we worry about a lot here," Teo said quietly, his hands working methodically as he prepared the coconut. "The fish don't come as close anymore, and sometimes the water doesn't look right." The man's expression shifted, genuine interest replacing distraction. "You're pretty observant for a kid selling coconuts." Teo shrugged. "My father was a fisherman before our boat got damaged. He taught me to notice things about the ocean." Something in the man's demeanor changed. He squatted down to Teo's eye level, introducing himself as Maxwell Johnson, asking thoughtful questions about what Teo had observed in the waters and how the community had adapted to the changes. As they spoke, Teo finished repairing the coconut, slicing off the top with practiced precision, using his well-worn machete. The simple grace of the movement seemed to fascinate Mr. Johnson. "How much do I owe you again?" the American asked, reaching once more for his wallet. Teo looked at the man's troubled eyes and made a split-second decision. "It's free, sir. You seem like you needed something good today." Maxwell blinked in surprise. "That's kind of you, but I can't take your livelihood." "It's just one coconut," Teo insisted with a smile. "My mother says generosity always finds its way back to you. Maxwell studied him for a long moment before accepting the coconut with genuine gratitude. He drank deeply, the cool liquid providing welcome relief from the heat. "This is the best coconut I've had in years," he declared, and Teo could tell he meant it. "What's your name, young man?" "Teo Okafor, sir." "Well, Teo Okafor, your mother is right about generosity." He paused, considering something. "Would you mind showing me around a bit? I'd like to see this community through your eyes, and I'll pay for your time, of course." Teo hesitated only briefly before nodding. Something about this unusual tourist felt trustworthy. He asked a neighboring vendor to watch his coconuts and led Maxwell away from the tourist area, beyond the glitz and artificial displays created to please foreign visitors. As they walked through the village, Teo explained how the fishing industry had sustained generations of families but was now struggling. He showed Maxwell the community center where his mother taught younger women to sew, the small school building with its leaking roof, and the harbor where fewer and fewer boats returned with adequate catches. Maxwell asked insightful questions, showing particular interest in how the offshore drilling platforms had affected daily life. He didn't just listen, he understood, connecting dots between corporate decisions and community impacts. When they reached the damaged fishing boat that had once been his family's pride, Teo fell silent. The splintered hull and cracked mast represented not just lost income, but a severed connection to ancestral traditions. "Your father can't afford to fix it?" Maxwell asked gently. Teo shook his head. "The parts we need must come from the city. By the time we save enough, something else always needs fixing first." Maxwell nodded, his gaze thoughtful as he studied the boat. "You know, I came here on vacation to escape problems, not find new ones. But sometimes life puts you exactly where you need to be." As the afternoon sun began its descent, they returned to Teo's coconut stand. Maxwell insisted on paying generously for the tour, pressing some into Teo's hand that exceeded a week's earnings. "I'd like to speak with your parents," Maxwell said. "I have a proposition that might interest them." Teo's curiosity surged. "What kind of proposition?" Maxwell smiled, finishing the last of his coconut water. "Let's just say that sometimes the most valuable business partners are the ones who understand the true cost of doing business. And you, Teo Okafor, understand more than most executives I've met." As they walked toward Teo's modest home, neither could predict how their lives were about to intertwine, or how a simple act of kindness with a free coconut would spark a transformation that would ripple through an entire community. The path to Teo's home wound through narrow alleyways where children played with handmade toys and elders sat in doorways, their knowing eyes following the strange pair, a local boy and a foreign man walking side by side as equals. The community's wariness of outsiders had grown over years of unfulfilled promises and extractive business practices that had left their waters depleted and their economic opportunities diminished. Teo's home stood modest but dignified among similar structures, distinguished by the vibrant cloth samples hanging from a clothesline, evidence of his mother Amara's seamstress work. As they approached, Teo's father Emmanuel emerged from the doorway, his weathered hands and vigilant posture revealing both his strength and a concern at seeing his son with stranger. "Baba, this is Mr. Johnson," Teo explained quickly in their native language. "He wanted to see our community. He has been kind." Emmanuel extended a hand with measured hospitality, the cautious welcome of a man who had learned that foreigners' interest in their village rarely benefited its residents. "Welcome to our home," he said in accented English. "Any friend of my son is welcome to sit with us." Inside, the one-room dwelling was organized with meticulous care. Amara rose from her sewing machine, her questioning eyes softening as Teo recounted their afternoon. The family's pride was evident in how they offered their best chair to Maxwell and prepared tea despite their limited resources. "Your son gave me a coconut today when I was having a difficult moment," Maxwell began, accepting the steaming cup with genuine appreciation. His kindness stood out in a way that made me curious about the person behind the gesture. "Kindness costs nothing," Amara replied with quiet dignity. "We have taught our children that generosity matters even more when you have little to give." Maxwell nodded thoughtfully. "That philosophy is increasingly rare in my world." He set his cup down carefully. "I should probably introduce myself properly. My name is Maxwell Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of Horizon Energy Corporation. The name hung in the air. Emmanuel and Amara exchanged glances. They recognized the company as one of the major players in the offshore drilling operations that had transformed their coastline and disrupted traditional fishing grounds. Your company's platforms are visible from our shores, Emmanuel stated evenly, neither accusatory nor deferential. Yes, Maxwell acknowledged, not avoiding the implication. That's part of what I want to discuss with you. Teo has shown me perspectives about our operations that our environmental impact reports and community liaisons have somehow missed. He explained how he had come to their country originally for a brief resort vacation to escape mounting pressures at his company. Recent reports had shown declining profits and growing community protests at several of their international operations. His board was pushing for cost-cutting measures and stricter security around their facilities. But something felt wrong about those solutions, Maxwell continued. They addressed symptoms, not causes. Today, walking with Teo, I began to understand why. Maxwell described how his company had followed standard industry practices for community engagement, making donations to local officials, holding information sessions about job opportunities, mostly low-level service positions, and conducting environmental assessments that technically met legal requirements but failed to capture the lived realities of communities like theirs. What Teo showed me was how these approaches missed the actual human impact, Maxwell said. Our drilling has changed fish migration patterns. Our security restrictions have cut off traditional fishing areas. The economic benefits we promise rarely reach families like yours. Emmanuel's posture remained guarded. These are things we have tried to explain at your company's community meetings. The representatives smile, take notes, and nothing changes. I believe you, Maxwell replied simply. Corporate structures can be designed, intentionally or not, to filter out uncomfortable truths before they reach decision-makers like me. As night fell, the family lit kerosene lamps that cast warm shadows across the walls. Maxwell asked thoughtful questions about their community's history, their challenges, and their aspirations. Teo watched with growing fascination as his parents gradually opened up, sharing insights about traditional fishing practices that had sustained their ecosystem for generations before industrial-scale operations arrived. Amara described how women in the community had developed cooperative arrangements for childcare and microenterprises, but lacked capital for expansion. Emmanuel explained sophisticated local knowledge about seasonal patterns and sustainability practices that corporate environmental assessments had never bothered to document. This is precisely what's missing from our operations, Maxwell said eventually. We have technical expertise but lack contextual wisdom. We measure economic impacts in broad statistics, but miss the texture of daily lives affected by our presence. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I want to propose something unconventional. Horizon Energy is facing both public relations challenges and operational inefficiencies. We need new approaches that create genuine shared value rather than extractive relationships with communities. Maxwell explained his proposition. A pilot partnership program where community representatives would have meaningful input into operational decisions, not merely token consultation, but structured collaboration with real authority. The program would include transparent profit-sharing arrangements, environmental remediation initiatives co-designed with local knowledge holders, and educational pathways for community members to access technical and management positions within the company. I'm not suggesting charity, Maxwell emphasized. I'm proposing a business relationship based on recognizing the value of your community's knowledge, your sustainable practices, and your right to benefit from resources extracted from your traditional territories. Emmanuel studied the American carefully. Many companies have made promises. Why should we believe yours will be different? A fair question, Maxwell acknowledged. I can't prove my intentions with words alone, but I'm prepared to start with concrete actions rather than promises. He reached into his pocket and removed a business card and a small notebook. Writing several phone numbers on the notebook page, he continued, This is my personal contact information, not a corporate liaison or PR department. I'm proposing that Teo, if you're willing, would serve as our initial community liaison. His job will be to honestly communicate community concerns directly to me, unfiltered by corporate hierarchy. Teo's eyes widened. Me? But I'm just a boy selling coconuts. "You're a young man who sees clearly and speaks truthfully," Maxwell corrected gently. "Those qualities are surprisingly rare and extraordinarily valuable in the business world." Amara interjected with maternal concern. "Teo has school responsibilities. His education must remain his priority." "Absolutely," Maxwell agreed. "This role would be part-time and compensated at professional consultant rates. In fact, supporting his education would be part of our arrangement." As the conversation deepened into specifics, it became apparent that Maxwell's proposition wasn't a spontaneous act of charity, but a thoughtful business strategy. He explained how indigenous knowledge systems and community-centered approaches were increasingly recognized as valuable assets in sustainable resource management. What had begun with Teo's simple gift of a coconut had evolved into a vision for restructuring corporate community relationships. "There will be resistance within my company," Maxwell admitted candidly. "Change threatens established power structures. But I believe this approach is not just morally right, but economically intelligent for long-term business sustainability." The conversation lasted until the small hours of the morning. Teo fought to stay awake, understanding that this night might represent a turning point not just for his family, but potentially for the entire community. As the discussion concluded, Emmanuel offered Maxwell a place to sleep, a gesture of trust that carried profound cultural significance. Before they retired, Maxwell made one final point. "Traditional corporate social responsibility treats community benefits as costs to be minimized. I want to invert that model, to recognize that community prosperity and corporate success can be aligned through thoughtful collaboration." As Teo finally drifted towards sleep on his mat, his mind swirled with possibilities. The coconut stand suddenly seemed a distant memory, replaced by visions of community transformation. Yet beneath his excitement lay a current of uncertainty. Would Maxwell's promises prove different from the many unfulfilled corporate commitments of the past? Or would this unlikely friendship truly change the trajectory of both their lives? Tomorrow will begin the challenging work of translating nighttime idealism into daylight realities. The path ahead would test not just Maxwell's commitment, but the community's capacity to engage with power on more equal terms. For Teo, standing at the intersection of these worlds, the journey was just beginning. Dawn broke over Makoko with renewed promise as Teo awoke to familiar sounds of his community stirring to life. The events of yesterday seemed almost dreamlike. Had an oil company so really slept under their humble roof? The sight of Maxwell speaking quietly with Emmanuel outside confirmed that the extraordinary conversation had indeed been real. The following weeks unfolded with cautious momentum. True to his word, Maxwell did not disappear back into the corporate world. Instead, he extended his stay, renting a modest room in the village rather than returning to the luxury resort. This simple choice spoke volumes to community members who had grown accustomed to foreigners observing their lives briefly before retreating to comfortable distance. "People need to see me walking these streets," Maxwell explained to Teo as they navigated the morning fish market. "Trust isn't built through documents, but through presence." Maxwell's presence, however, initially sparked suspicion rather than immediate acceptance. Generations of exploitative relationships had taught Makoko to be wary of corporate interests. At the first community meeting Maxwell attended, the tension was palpable as elders questioned his intentions with a hard-earned skepticism of those who had watched promises evaporate like morning mist. Elder Nkechi, respected for her unwavering advocacy for the community, challenged him directly. "Your company has taken from our waters for 15 years. Now you speak of partnership. Why should we believe anything has changed?" Maxwell didn't respond with defensive corporate language or vague assurances. Instead, he acknowledged the legitimacy of their distrust. "You're right to question me. Words are cheap. That's why I'm proposing we start with concrete actions before asking for your trust." The first of these actions materialized when fishing equipment arrived to repair Emmanuel's boat, not as charity, but as an initial investment in what Maxwell termed community knowledge infrastructure. The repaired vessel would serve partly for Emmanuel's fishing, but also to document environmental conditions and fishing ground changes, creating data that both the community and company could use. For Teo, life transformed dramatically. His mornings now included school as always, but afternoons found him in unprecedented territory. participating in meetings where corporate representatives and community members attempted to bridge worlds that had long existed in parallel. His role evolved from simple messenger to cultural translator, helping each side understand the unstated assumptions behind the other's words. When they talk about acceptable impact levels, they don't understand that means real people going hungry. Teo explained to Maxwell after one particularly tense exchange. And when our elders talk about respecting the water's rhythms, the engineers don't recognize that as generations of scientific observation. These insights proved invaluable as Maxwell began the delicate work of restructuring Horizon Energy's approach. He faced significant resistance within his own company, particularly from shareholders concerned about short-term profits and executives uncomfortable with sharing decision-making power. "They think I've lost my mind," Maxwell confided to Emmanuel one evening as they shared a simple meal. But the data is starting to speak for itself. When we integrate local knowledge into our operations, we're seeing improved efficiency and fewer disruptions. The partnership model evolved organically, shaped by constant negotiation rather than imposed design. A community environmental monitoring committee was established, with paid positions for local knowledge holders. A transparent profit-sharing framework was developed, directing a percentage of earnings into community-governed development funds rather than individual payments that might create new inequalities. Most significantly, a training program emerged, creating pathways for community members to gain technical skills and credentials that would qualify them for substantive roles within Horizon Energy. Amara's leadership abilities found new expression as she helped organize a cooperative of local women who began providing services to the company. Everything from sustainable food supply for offshore workers to specialized protective garments designed with both traditional craftsmanship and modern safety requirements. 6 months after the day Teo offered a free coconut, Makoko had begun a subtle but profound transformation. The changes weren't flashy or immediate. No gleaming new buildings or sudden wealth. But something more fundamental was shifting in the relationship between community and a corporate presence that had so long dominated their shores. The fishing grounds nearest the drilling platforms were temporarily closed, not by corporate security, but by mutual agreement, to allow marine life recovery after years of disruption. Horizon Energy absorbed the short-term costs while fishermen received compensation and training as environmental monitors. Data gathered through this collaboration revealed patterns that corporate scientists had missed, leading to operational adjustments that reduced ecological impact while maintaining productivity. For Teo, now 13, the most meaningful change came in the form of a new community learning center, not a charity project, but a strategic investment in developing local talent. Here, traditional knowledge and formal education merged in a curriculum co-developed by community elders and education professionals. Young people studied conventional subjects alongside traditional ecological knowledge and community history. This isn't just about creating future employees, Maxwell explained during the center's opening. It's about recognizing that sustainable business requires sustainable communities with diverse knowledge systems. Not everything progressed smoothly. Corporate shareholders questioned Maxwell's approach. Community members sometimes disagreed about priorities, and a legacy of mistrust created recurring tensions. The transformation was neither simple nor complete. It was an ongoing negotiation requiring constant attention and good faith from all sides. 1 year after their first meeting, Teo and Maxwell stood on the beach where a coconut stand had once represented the limited economic opportunities available to community youth. Now that same spot hosted a small monitoring station where elders taught young people to document changes in tide patterns, water quality, and marine biodiversity, knowledge that directly informed drilling operations. "I never imagined a coconut could lead to all this," Teo reflected, watching fishing boats, including his father's fully restored vessel, returning with healthier catches than they'd seen in years. Maxwell smiled. It wasn't the coconut. It was the spirit behind it. Genuine generosity without expectation of return. That's actually a profound business principle that gets lost in conventional corporate thinking. 3 years later, as Teo prepared to leave for university, his education now funded through the Community Development Program, Makoko had become a case study in alternative corporate community relations. Representatives from other villages affected by resource extraction came to observe the partnership model. Horizon Energy stock had initially dropped when Maxwell announced a new approach, but had since rebounded as operational efficiencies and reduced conflicts demonstrated long-term value. "You're coming back after you graduate?" Maxwell asked as they stood at the bus station, the young man now eye level with his mentor. "Of course," Teo replied without hesitation. "Everything I'm learning is meant to serve here. The agreement guarantees me a position, but even without that, this is home." The transformation of Makoko wasn't just about economic improvements or environmental remediation. It represented something more profound, a reclamation of dignity and agency by a community that had long been treated as an obstacle to corporate progress rather than a source of wisdom and value. On the day of his departure, Teo walked once more through the village, now bustling with a delicate balance of traditional practices and new opportunities. Women gathered at Amar's expanded workshop, where traditional textiles were now being incorporated into innovative designs. The harbor hosted both fishing vessels and environmental monitoring boats. The community center displayed both ancestral knowledge and technical diagrams. As he boarded the bus of the city, Teo carried with him a simple reminder, a carved wooden coconut given to him by Elder Nkechi. "Remember," she had told him, "that transformation doesn't come from the powerful choosing to be generous. It comes when we assert our own worth and demand to be recognized as equals." This understanding would guide Teo through his education and eventual return, not as someone rescued by corporate benevolence, but as part of a community that had transformed an extractive relationship into a collaborative one. The journey that began with a simple act of kindness had revealed a profound truth. Sustainable change requires not just individual generosity, but collective recognition of interdependence and mutual respect. As the bus pulled away, Teo glimpsed Maxwell walking with community elders along the shore, their animated discussion suggesting that the work of transformation continued. Imperfect, challenging, but founded on a radical notion that different worlds could meet not in domination, but in partnership. The coconut stand where it all began was long gone, but the spirit it represented had taken root in something far more enduring, a community reclaiming its voice, its knowledge, and its future.